Welcome to Rico 12. I'm Justin, your host and a grateful child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and an addict living in the miracle of recovery. Rico 12 is all about exploring the common threads of addiction and sharing tools and hope from those on a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and places to learn and support one another. Our speakers represent various fellowships, afflictions, and addictions, thus showing the common threads of recovery, no matter what road we're walking. Before getting into the business of today's meeting, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Silvio for being willing to speak today, and I'm excited to get to him. His topic today, he's a first-time Rico 12 speaker, but his topic today is sharing his experience of 17 years of untreated alcoholism, and I'm really happy that he'll be sharing on this topic. It's something that I think is important to really dig into. We'll get to his talk and the Q&A afterwards in just a minute. First, for a little bit of business, Rico 12 has several recovery resources in our family of podcasts and social media communities. To learn more, listen more, connect more, or just hang out and learn and grow with us, you can check out the other podcasts that I have with Rico 12, Noodle It Out with Nikki M, Big Book Roundtable, Rico 12 Shares. Each of these release weekly. To learn more about each of these podcasts, check out the chat. I'll post some information in the chat of this meeting and in the show notes of the podcast, or go to reco12.com. That's reco12.com, and check those things out. All right. I am scheduling speakers into May right now. So if anybody out there is like, hey, I've got a message that I need to share, reach out to me at reco12pod@gmail.com, and we'll get the ball rolling on that. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue our mission. Thank you this week to all who are spearheads, who are continuing to donate to the cause. If you would like to join in with the spearheads and support Rico 12, please consider going to reco12.com/support. I'll put links in the chat and the show notes that you can check out there. Your support does make a difference in helping us share this message of recovery worldwide. This last week, we went over 150,000 downloads for the Rico 12 speaker meeting podcast. And that's crazy. It's really cool. Thank you all for sharing this message. We look forward each meeting and each week to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'm going to introduce today's speaker for today, Silvio D, and give a little background on him. Silvio is an active member of Cocaine Anonymous, sponsored and sponsoring. He's been through the steps twice and is coming up on 2.5 years sober, one day at a time. He's GSR of the Friendship on Fridays CA meeting in Covent Garden in London. His favorite prayer is the Serenity Prayer, and he hosts and publishes the 12-Step Recovery podcast, 12 Steps and 12 Questions. Take it away, Silvio. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you for having me. Thank you for putting up such a brilliant podcast and such a brilliant meeting. Congratulations on all the work that you do. It's amazing. I'd like to first say welcome to everybody. If you're new or if you're old, if you are new in the rooms or if you've been around for a while. My name is Silvio. I'm an addict, first and foremost. I'm glad to be here. I usually am never on this meeting because on Fridays is my evening of my home group, the Friendship on Fridays meeting in Covent Garden in London. But I'm really glad that I'm here today. I've chosen a topic that I've not spoken about almost at all so far in the 2.5 years that I've been in the rooms. And that topic is the 17 years of untreated alcoholism that I had between my 20s and my 40s, where I was able, for some reason, and we'll get to that, I was able to stay away from cocaine and what is my primary drug of no choice, which is cocaine and all kinds of stimulants, really. And it is a story of 17 years of untreated alcoholism, so all the unmanageability and so on, and we'll get to that. But it's also, and this is something I've come to recognize and realize just since I've come into the rooms, the story of an unconscious connection or disconnection to a power greater than myself, even though I didn't know about it at that time. It was impossible for me to really understand it then, but it is what I've come to understand now. I'm going to caveat this right away. I don't know exactly why I have been able to do that. A bit like the book says that the alcoholic may not drink for months or years even and still be alcoholic. There is a solution, it says, that we cannot answer the riddle. And so in many ways, like I don't know when rather, I crossed that invisible line of becoming a full-blown addict. I can't exactly tell you. There's always that powerful, cunning, mysterious bit. Why I've been able to do it, but I will try and do my very best because it is something that has kept me outside the rooms. This is why this is important for a long, long time. So a little bit about myself and how I've come to this point. Since ever I could think, I have been perhaps the most thin-skinned person I've ever met. I am afflicted, like so many of us, with different bits of feeling uncomfortable in my own skin, feeling uncomfortable around people, having a voice in my head which tells me all sorts of unpleasant things, either about you or about me or about my surroundings or about everything else. And I have struggled in one way or another with this inside illness, the ism as we call it, or the ick, since ever I was able to think, really. And so as a young child, I used chocolate to soothe this disease. But then as I grew older, by the time I was 15 or so, I liked alcohol much. I did drink, but I didn't like it much. And I could see how other people would blackout drink and all the rest of it. And that rather put me off. But pretty quickly, I realized that if I put marijuana or hash into the equation, then that would numb me and dumb me enough to be able to survive whatever was happening and able to cope, for better or for worse, with this life. It wasn't great, but I was able to cope. That moment that is so often described and so brilliantly described in Bill's story, that moment of, oh my God, the world is all of a sudden amazing, didn't occur to me until I was 22 or 21. And I took my first ecstasy tablet. That is when that moment occurred where I thought, oh my God, I have found it was like a Lego bricks. It would fit onto me and solve my problems like nothing else I'd ever thought was possible, right? It made me a lot cooler. And even though I've said this many times, I'm an extrovert, but I can still be uncomfortable talking to other people. And it would put me at ease to talk to girls. It would make me free of the eternal worry, the fear, the skepticism, the pessimism, the depression. It would make me free sexually. It did everything for me that I could not possibly do for myself. Pretty quickly, though, it started having pretty serious consequences on my mental health. So in my early 20s, I was already starting to suffer pretty quickly, as I said. I was starting to suffer with deep depression and with excruciating panic attacks. And so that went on for quite a while. So on the one hand, I was using and I was drinking and I was partying and it would give me what I quote unquote needed. And on the other hand, I realized pretty quickly then that this was clearly connected, that every time I came off it, I was going through excruciating pain that would last longer and longer and longer. And here comes the slightly baffling bit. I was about 24 or 25 when I had broken up with, or rather she had broken up with me, the person I was doing a lot of drugs with. I was in a druggy relationship. It was the end of college. And I could not live with this situation with myself any longer. I was just one walking panic attack. It was, at all times, I could not just live with myself. It was awful. I was in heaps and heaps of pain, and the drugs stopped working. I knew they were making it worse, and the drugs just stopped working. And somehow my using ground to a halt. Actually, my entire life ground to a halt. I tried to get some help, and I went to see some drug services here, but I was never really taken into the rooms. So I should have really, I wish I had found the rooms back then. Whether I'd have been able to hear the message, I don't know, but I wish I had found it at the time. But here I was 24, 25. I was a very unwell man. right? You'd have thought that perhaps by just taking away the drugs, taking away the problem, I'd be a lot happier and in a better place and so on and so forth. But I wasn't. I was in a terrible place. And I struggled on from there without a solution, right? Now, if I could just stay here for a second, what happened was that I had this moment with myself. I don't know how long it took or so, but it was a moment where I realized that either I was going to carry on using like I was using and essentially kill myself, or try and become someone. I was quite ambitious and I wanted to become someone in this world. Now, in more about alcoholism on page 32, and I wish only someone had read this to me at the time, and I'm just going to read a very, very quick piece of this. This is the man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. I think we've all read it. And once he started, he had no control whatsoever. And here comes that bit. He had made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. Similar for me, it speaks here of an alcoholic being able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. And that describes my experience exactly. Although, of course, I only know this with the benefit of hindsight and having done the steps twice and so on and so forth. For the next 17 years, until in my early 40s, I started using cocaine again. I suffered with untreated alcoholism, and I was at the same time unconsciously connecting and disconnecting to a power greater than myself. So I would just like to give you a few examples of what that actually looked like. So I was already talking about the panic attacks, the depression, the mental health, which was really, really terrible. I had, because of all the panic attacks, but also because of I had some bad trips and some bad drug experiences and so on. I had some form of, loosely speaking, PTSD. It isn't the right word, but let's just roll with it. And I became anti-drugs at that time. So again, I'm not a well person. If I'm at a party and there's someone at the other end of the far end of the room and they're lighting a spliff, or they're doing some drugs, I had to leave the party. I could not be around this at all, right? Really a far cry from the 10-step promises, right? Another thing was that because I had decided that I wanted to become someone, I started pretty immediately overworking. So, I would work very long hours, just trying to get my mind off the way I was feeling, trying to get my mind and my spirit away from what was really going on inside, right? Which was that here I was sober, I was struggling through this life, and I wasn't really able to cope. And this carried on and on and on. I say this, and it comes out in a second. But of course, if we're talking about, let's say, the fact that I was so anti-drugs, that was good. That went on for 5, 6, 7 years until it finally just slightly leveled off. And as I said, I wasn't a well man. Another thing that happened fairly quickly afterwards was that I started overeating, and that became, while it wasn't a serious enough issue to get me into the rooms, it became a serious issue with the people around me, with my wife in particular, because here I was, all of a sudden, for instance, I went through a grieving period. My father had passed away, and I'm putting on 10, 20, 30, 35 pounds. And I am struggling really badly. My clothes don't fit me anymore and so on. And then the next thing that happens is like, oh shit, I look absolutely terrible. So I bought a whole lot of really expensive designer clothes and then would shrink myself, right? Over years, so months and months and months, sometimes over years, shrink myself into these clothes, right? Cross addiction, I suppose, is the word that we're looking for here. And then once that was done and everybody thought, oh, finally, he's back on track, I'd start the cycle again, and I would overeat again, and I would put on all the weight again. And I did this over a course of 6 or 7, 8 years, where I did this repeatedly, up the scale, down the scale, up the scale, down the scale. So overeating, restricting, overeating, restricting, and obviously overspending. right? Expensive clothes that because I need to look a certain way, I'm full of pride and I'm full of fear and I'm bidding for social inclusion and all those things. And then my wife always, and we get to know so much about what people say to us repeatedly, especially our partners. My wife would always say to me, why is it that you can't just do things a little bit? Okay, you want to lose a bit of weight, lose a little bit of weight. You don't have to go onto a crash diet. Okay, you want to look nicer, buy some clothes. Okay, get 2 jackets. Yeah, don't get 5. Get the ones that fit you. Eat healthy, eat normal. There's no, have a bit of chocolate. And I could never, ever do that. That was the one bit I was never able to do, no matter what I was engaged in, whether it was overeating, overspending, overworking, being anti-drugs, or whatever it was. I was never able to do it in a somewhat moderate manner. Okay. And it baffled me. I was a baffled man for 17 years. At the same time, good things happened in that time. Really, really good things. And it is only with the benefit of hindsight, as I said earlier, that I realize what happened there. And I connected to God, to a power greater than myself in different ways. I just didn't know it. I'm a trained actor, and we get a bad rep. Even the book, takes us as a bad example, doesn't it? So I was trained in the Meisner technique. And if you'll just stay with me here for a second, right? The Meisner technique is famous for one thing. It is that you take your cues from the other actor, right? So from the person in front of you. So it isn't an internal process, me, my story, my blah, blah. It is an external process. It was the first time that I learned, and I was in love with this, the first time that I learned to really focus on the person in front of me, where all of a sudden, all me, all Silvio, which is constantly keeping me busy, keeping my head busy, all of me was taken away, and I was really and truly engaged with someone else. And in that other person, I found God and a power greater than myself. I was able to finally, what we still do, this is a precursor almost, of working with another alcoholic, a precursor of getting out of self. I just didn't have those words for it then. And I loved it. I still do. It is, for me, it was a wonderful technique to get me into a different headspace, but it was also a wonderful way to treat my untreated alcoholism. As I say, I just didn't know it. And that was one thing. Another thing was that I had this attraction to spiritual people. I constantly had really spiritual people around me, right? Today, we might call them angels or something like that, or messengers. I was always well surrounded, and those people helped me. I didn't know it then. They were just friends, but they were always in my life, be it my acting teacher, be it the people that, I call my true friends. I was so blessed that I was able to be with people who, for whatever reason, provided a bridge that I wasn't able quite yet to be myself, for myself, so to speak. They provided a bridge to God, to a power greater than myself, to love, to light, to the universe, to the other side. Another thing that kept me connected to a power greater than myself was this book, or 2 books that I fell in love with. One of them, I've got it right here, actually. It's this old book here from the 90s. I don't know if anybody knows it. It's called The Artist's Way. It was a super famous book in the 90s, if you've heard of it. And it's written by an author called Julia Cameron. And what I know now, but I didn't know then, was, even though it sort of says it in the book, but I didn't connect the dots, and you should probably guess I didn't connect a lot of dots in that time, it is a book. It's a 12-week program to uncover your creativity if you're blocked. And it is loosely based on the 12 steps. She even talks about God and the universe in there. It was the first time that the word God would come to me, and she caveats it with the words that we use in the rooms: good orderly direction, group of drunks. And it was her theory, one that I subscribe to, that we as people need to get out of the way, and that all creativity comes from upstairs. with a capital U. And again, I fell in love with this book and I fell in love with this process. And it was another way. Will take 2 or 3 years out of my life. It was another way of connecting. And what is so interesting is I would go through these phases of what I was saying. So I'd be overworking or overeating, then I'd find a book, or I'd speak to spiritual people, or one of those things. And I would just kind of go in and out and in and out and in and out. And that essentially is, even though I can't exactly explain it, but that is essentially how I came through 17 years of untreated alcoholism. I'll just mention another couple of things of how I connected. One, everybody knows it, is Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, and all the other books. So again, I was friends with a lot of people who were quite spiritual, and they would give me books and they would say, I think you'd really benefit from this. And I was quite full of ego, and I was like, oh, really? What book? And so on. And eventually they fell in love with these things and fell in love with the teachings. And again, that was another thing that allowed me to stay away from stimulants, essentially. Now, why I was able to drink socially in that time for a while, I can't explain. Maybe because it isn't my primary addiction, maybe because I was busy eating. I really can't explain it. This will be something for another talk in 2.5 years, or maybe I'll never know, right? I even towards the very end of these 17 years, I did a mindfulness course, and I learned to meditate properly. Came in quite handy later on. And we all know it, God's got a great sense of humor. I learned to meditate in a room where now the Borough meeting is held on Thursday evening. So I learned how to meditate in the room that I then later on spoke about alcoholism and learned to stay sober. And it's one of those wonderful God moments that I have experienced along the way. Now, in the end, I felt that neither the book nor just meditation in and of itself, or any acting techniques or anything else was a permanent connection to a power greater than myself. They were always, in one way or another, transitory. It's almost as if I would be constantly either engaging in untreated alcoholism and just become completely mad, or be calmed down by these other things that would connect me. And it's interesting, towards the end of my time in the meditation program, I felt that this was all really nice. It wasn't just meditation, it was a group. We would talk about things like we talk about in the rooms. We talk about resentments and jealousy and these sort of things. And I felt good there. But I felt that, I remember this so clearly, that I had no compelling reason to stay. That was it. I had no compelling reason to stay, or at least I thought so. And came trauma that came into my life again, and I reacted with first starting to drink alcoholically, which was not something I had ever done before. I was able to drink socially, but it wasn't something that I was able to keep up, because in my heart of heart, of course, I'm an addict and an alcoholic, and I don't know where I crossed the invisible line, but I had crossed it somewhere at some point. And so I returned. I'm paraphrasing someone's chair, but I returned home to the mothership, and eventually, through the trauma and through the added alcoholism and so on, eventually ended up back to my original addiction and to my original problem and my original drug of no choice, and that is stimulants, and in this case, it was cocaine. And right away, when I reconnected, quote unquote, to the drugs, right away, I stopped caring about anything that had to do with spirituality, about, Tolle or meditating or anything like that. And I picked up exactly where it left off. I've heard this so many times, and it is my experience also. My level of addiction, my level of powerlessness when I started again after 17 years was exactly the same when I left off in my early 20s. So within 2 or 3 years, it brought me to my knees. I was desperate. And after much ado and much fighting and overdosing, I came into the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous, where I am still today. And it's really funny because in some ways I think, well, I have found a compelling reason, have I not? The one that I seem to lack. I have no regrets in terms of, oh, I wish, I wouldn't have gone down that route. If only I had stayed in the meditation group or anything like that. It went the way it went, and I would not exchange my best moments then for my worst moments now, as the book says. This book, Cocaine Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, strong sponsorship, strong involvement with other addicts, sponsoring. This is the solution which I have found, which is not only transitory, but is permanent. It offers a full design for living, and it allows me to live a full and a content life most of the time, provided I do all the right bits that are required for the program. And over time, it started solving as well all those bits and pieces that I was never really able to get a hold on when I was still untreated, overeating, overspending, and all the other bits, overworking. Not saying they never happen, but it is a far cry. The 2.5 years that I've spent in CA and in AA, they're a far cry, an absolutely far cry away from the 17 years that I've had in untreated alcoholism. So I think I've come to the end of my little story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Silvio, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope in that story. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of people can look at that and gain some hope, look for some light, and say, you know what, I get it. Silvio understands where I've been. I must have what he has. Kind of the big book phrase there. I've written down a few questions to our live audience here. If you have questions for Silvio, please type them in the chat of the meeting. We'll get to those as you go along. If you'd like to have your name kept anonymous in that, just type in anonymous, please, in the chat question. I'll just anonymous. If you're good with me announcing your name, I'll announce your name. But I've gotten a few questions, just like I mentioned. I'd like to start off with you said I became anti-drug, and if I went to a party and someone was lighting up or whatever, I had to run away. And you said, that's not really 10th step promise. And I want to ask you about that. So 10th step promise, one of them says we recoiled as from a hot flame. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between recoiling as from a hot flame and running away? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So it says recoiling as if from a hot flame, but it also says we've ceased fighting everything and everyone, including alcohol. And at that time, I was fighting, right? Yes, you're quite right. It looks like I'm just recoiling, but it isn't. There is a sane way of recoiling as if from a hot flame, right? So if you put the famous hand on the stove or close to it, you just go, oh, I'm not doing that again. And then that's the end of the story, right? You don't go sit on your sofa, think about it all the time, think about how all of that is wrong, how that should be happening, how you wouldn't want it anywhere near you, and how you wish had all these people who are using, they would all just disappear. I didn't want to be close to anybody who was in any which way, shape, or form involved with drugs. It was dangerous. It was dangerous. It wasn't a sane reaction. It was insane.
Yeah, I love that. And the very next promise after we recoil from a hot flame is we react sanely and normally. If I'm like you said, if I put my hand on or near a hot stove or a campfire and I get it too close, I pull back. But I'm not, like he said, I love how he said that. I don't run in the other room and say, okay, now all these regulations have to be made to protect people from hot stoves and protect me because I'm so angry at the hot stove. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Another question I have for you, Silvio, is it goes back to the way you introduced yourself. You said, one of the things you said right up front is, I think I'm about the most thin-skinned person there ever was. Just we alcoholics are sensitive people. Talk to me about how that has shifted over the time in recovery from being thin-skinned to maybe what you are, maybe a little bit less thin-skinned, or maybe able to let things go now.
So I'm still thin-skinned, undoubtedly, but got one word for you: inventory. A lot of it goes down into my inventory, and a lot of it, if I'm in a spiritually sane place, if I'm in a good place, I'm not going to be as thin-skinned as I used to be, right? If I'm really thin-skinned, like in the old style, then I know something's off. I'm off. I need another meeting. I need to work with someone. Do I have enough sponsees? Is there another service commitment that I need to pick up? There needs something that needs to be improved there in my recovery, right? If I'm in a good place generally, and I find that I'm being extremely thin-skinned, then either I need to find out what's happening, right? Or I need a bit of inventory usually, and then go with the 10th step, really, asking for it to be removed, speaking to someone about it, and then working with someone else. So generally speaking, no, I'm not as thin-skinned as I used to be. I can put it more into perspective. And if I find that something does get to me, then inventory.
Yeah. And what does an inventory look like to you in the moment? I know you talked about step 10, right? Ask God, talk to another person, move on. But talk to us like prescriptively. What does that look like?
Well, let's say something does get to me, something that I don't know, say my wife said, it's often the people close to us, really, isn't it? Or people from my birth family, my mother, my sister. And I will walk away from a conversation or something like that, or 20 minutes later, I will have this pit in my stomach and something just got to me and I can't really explain it. Something got under my skin. That is the first thing. So it's a way, how do I feel in my body? That's why I noticed it. Is there how can I explain it? It says, is there like a knot in my stomach or something, right? Is there something that I feel uncomfortable with? Or am I flying off the handle 20 minutes later in a different situation, right? And then I need to sit down and really take my time. It takes a little bit of time that I need to take out of my oh so busy day, right? And sit down and think, okay, what is that had me upset? Find what it was and then do an inventory on that, right? It's not always, it doesn't immediately come to me. Sometimes I need to dig a little bit. But that is the way I usually go about it. Sometimes I need a conversation. I might just need a conversation with my sponsor or with a recovery friend. Sometimes that helps me to get to the bottom of it. But essentially what it is that I feel it in my body first, and then I need to do a little bit of digging. And once I've dug, I'm able to usually deal with it with the help of the 10-step process.
Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things you said there that really opened me up to this next question I have for you. You said, in my oh so busy day, you and I and everybody here, we are pretty busy people. We think, I just don't have time for that. Talk to me about your experience about the importance of making time for smoothing things out rather than saying, you know what, I'm too busy right now. I'll try to address it later tonight. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts on that is that the more I think that whatever else that I'm doing is more important, the more I'm actually in need of doing a 10th step in that moment, or taking a break away from what I ever think is really, really important. Now, I'm going to be, let me be really honest. I usually in that moment, I'm like, oh God, do I really have to do this now? Right? This isn't necessarily always a voluntary process, right? It requires me to do something that I don't want to do sometimes, right? I have a tendency to do my morning routine, speak to some sponsees, and then the workday begins. And sometimes I might just go through a day of 6-7 hours where I haven't even nothing happens in that time that connects me to a power greater than myself. That may occur. So therefore, I put some timers on my phone. There is a wonderful, it's a Muslim app, and you've got this wonderful muezzin singing at you, right? Chanting, right? And that will, I've got this on my phone. And whenever I start thinking that I need to turn off that app, or that guy really annoys me, or that, it's just too often in a day, that is when I know those are my telltale signs that I need more time for recovery and need more time for me. Well, I say for me, I need more time for God, really, right? That is how I know. Again, it's not a flawless process that I'm talking about here, right? It does. I mess up with this. I do mess up with this, but it is what I've learned and what I'm improving on, hopefully, one day at a time.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the honesty in it. If you or I or anybody is talking about, hey, this is how I am all the time. Well, first of all, I'm probably lying if I say that that's how I am all the time. But second of all, it's not really helping the person who's struggling and going, Well, I need, like you talked about, all or nothing. Why can't we just do things just a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to remember this is a lifetime process. This should continue for our lifetime. We're not saints. Progress, not perfection. Talk to us a little bit about how, you talked about, hey, it's all in or all out, with your food and with stuff
Yeah.
like that. How
Yeah.
do you temper that with these types of things that we're talking about now, inventorying and stuff like that?
Yeah. So again, I don't have a full-on handle on this, right? I only gave up chocolate, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, right? So this this is very much a work in progress. I just decided at some point that not to wait sort of until I have 10 years of uninterrupted serenity before I speak on certain matters, right? Because otherwise we might be here forever. And so I think it was such a brilliant share from someone in Covent Garden not so long, a while ago. And she's 16 years clean, and she said, "Look, you've got some time to sort these things out, right? You don't have to do everything at once, right?" And I really didn't. So in the first few months of my recovery, I did overeat. Of my recovery from cocaine and alcohol in particular, I did overeat. I have overspent in recovery. But it was never to the point where it really got me into trouble. That was the first step, if you will. And I'm hoping that I can surrender, and this has been my experience, surrender just a little bit, time and time and time again. Bob D said this, is that such a brilliant analogy, unsurprisingly, from Bob D, who said that, we in step 3 we sort of give our will away, we throw it like a towel into the ring, like a boxer, or rather his coach, and then we secretly take it back, and then we give it back bit by bit by bit. Here's my eating, here are my taxes, here's my love life, here's my everything, right? So it's a little bit like that.
I love that. Thank you. That's a big takeaway for me. I appreciate that. We have a question from our live audience. This comes in from Becky. Becky says, "What is your top tip for improving your spirituality, Silvio?"
Right. My top tip for improving my spirituality. I have found a healthy morning routine to be one of the pillars of my recovery. This is what it looks like. And I have two versions. I have a long version and a short version because we're all human. We get up sometimes late, the alarm doesn't ring. If you have children, it's all the more difficult, and so on, right? So I have two versions. One is a longer version, one is a short version that I will do if the proverbial has hit the fan and I get up too late, and so on. The long version, which is not all that long, it takes about 40 minutes, which isn't that much time in the big scheme of things, is the first thing I do after I come back from the bathroom is I will immediately meditate. I don't look at my phone. I don't look at any, I'm not really on social media, but I don't look at any of those things, right? I don't look at any messages. First thing I do, first things first, is I meditate 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If I'm feeling quote unquote a bit cloudy, I'm going to use a guided meditation. There's so much stuff out there, so much really good stuff. The resources we have at our disposal are amazing, right? So find a meditation that I resonate with. I do that at a different time and then just get back to this meditation if I'm feeling a bit cloudy or a bit off or something. And if not, I just do a regular meditation. If meditation is difficult, it's something that you can learn. And I think it's something that, that just sitting with myself, which can be the most difficult thing, right, is so important to me because you can't really lie to yourself for a long time if you sit down for 10 or 15 minutes every morning, right? You can't really lie to yourself. It's just my experience, of course. And after the meditation, I will say step 3 prayer, step 7 prayer, other prayers, and I will talk directly for 6, 7, 8, 10 minutes to God, to good, to a power greater than myself. I will then have some readings. I will just, readings that get sent around by people on WhatsApp groups. I will read the daily, what is it called? The daily reflection, I think, on AA, or people sent me stuff. And I also post a couple of readings from spiritual readings into the groups. That all takes me about 40, 45 minutes all round. And as I said, there's a shortened version for when the alarm doesn't ring or whatever. And that is, if I don't do this, my entire day really it's quite easy for my entire day to just really go out of control, to just it just kind of go somewhere where I'm not really connected anymore. So that's, I think, such a super important thing for me every day.
Thank you for sharing that, Silvio. I love the routine, the information you shared on that.
Mm,
That's very important for me too. My morning routine is where my day kicks off. I have to start it
yeah.
with God, and then start it in recovery with another fellow, and that's where that happens. One of the things that you mentioned is that you're a trained actor, and the method you were trained in is observing others, and that's how you
Yeah.
found God, is
Mm,
in others, in not in necessarily judging what they are, but learning from them and what they're saying in order to react or respond. Talk to
mm.
us a little bit more about that process and how that
Yeah.
helps you see God.
Right. So when I really focus in this technique on the person opposite me, and this is just a technique, but obviously this is sort of it's art imitating life. So um, if I really focus on someone else and I really truly look at the other person, I take them in and I do away with all my preconceived ideas, with what I think I should be having for lunch, or if I'm wearing the wrong shoes, or if that person is whatever my judgment or idea might be about them, right? If we get behind the veneers and behind the veneers that we all have, and I find that true connection to another person, one to one. The moment all my thoughts are removed, or most of them anyway, that moment of true connection, I believe, is just another way of experiencing God, right? Doesn't need to involve any actors, it's just with anyone around you.
Yeah, I love that, and that takes me to I think it relates directly to recovery too. When all other measures failed, work one alcoholic with another, save the day. And I think in order to have that work one alcoholic with another, I've got to be able to listen, to be able to
Mm,
share, and to be able to understand a little bit deeper than what the preconceived notions are. As I'm sitting in this podcast, for example, in this recording, as I'm listening to you and to others speak, I have in my mind, and sometimes this trips me up. Okay, I need to pay attention to what they say so I can write a question to come back to them later. And sometimes that trips me up because I start thinking and prejudging what I want to ask or what I hope they say and interpret it. How do you keep that process open in your mind so you don't jump ahead a couple of steps and stay present with them?
Well, I don't always do it, and I don't always do it well. Let's start with that. It is, it's not something I can keep up for eternity either. But a little bit like when you are, let's say, you're working with someone on their step, or you're in a step 5 or something like that. If you start thinking in the other direction, if your mind runs away with you, right? Just like in a meditation, you just very gently usher it back to what is going on in that moment, right? So onto the other person, what they're saying, or if all else fails, maybe just to your own body and how where you're sitting, where are you in contact with the ground, and can you feel yourself breathing, right? That takes me right back into out of my head and into the moment, into my body, so that I can be there and be present. And sometimes I just need to do that 100 times, 100 times in a row, and sometimes fewer times. But yeah, it's not something that comes easy, that's for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Silvio. And a reminder to our live audience, if you have a question for Silvio, type it in the chat. We'll get to it here. I've got another question or two here, but you mentioned, well, cross
Mm,
addiction. Oftentimes, the primary addiction, when that's mediated, other things other things pop their heads up, and I'm dealing with some of that right now in my own life.
mm,
Talk to us a little bit about how, and you've already addressed this a little bit, but how to address those things as they start cropping up and popping up.
mm. Oh God, I have often sat, and I still sometimes will sit in a meeting or in a room, and I'm thinking everybody else is just so brilliant, and I'm just feeling so awful here at the back, and everybody's getting this right, and I'm getting everything wrong, and so on and so forth. And that is often related to cross addiction. So I might, even after coming back home from a really brilliant meeting, and I've done service and so on and so forth, and out of nowhere, seemingly, either the urge to sort of shop for really nice stuff comes in, or I have to have lots of cake or whatever it is. How to best deal with it? I have found that what works for my cocaine and alcohol addiction will also work for other stuff, for cross addiction. And it's the old whack-a-mole thing, isn't it? The moment you sort of get a handle on the eating, then the shopping comes. And the moment you get the handle on the shopping, then the working comes, and so on and so forth. And then it goes round and round. And I'm yet to find a long period where I don't engage in anything at all, right? In anything at all for any prolonged period of time. But I find that can I find another sponsee, someone else to work with? The harder I work my program, the more I work my program, the less likely I am, right? The less likely I am to engage in other cross addictions. But then sometimes, and I've done a few meetings in OA, for instance, right? And I have some sponsees who have gone to SLA maybe, or CODA. Sometimes it's really just good to go and visit other fellowships, right? That's what they're there for. I felt so incredibly welcomed when I went to OA, right? Where people with my exact experience were there, and I was able to relate to them, and I know that they're there if I need to return to them. Which for the time being, it doesn't look like it, but ask me next week and it might be different.
Yeah. Thank you, Silvio. I think there's some real words of wisdom in there. In fact, as we start to wrap things up and wind things down here, do you have any additional words of wisdom for us, maybe from your message, or that's come up that you're like, you know what, I wish I would have said that, or I need to say that?
Yeah. It's a little bit what I was just saying just now, about the amount of times I've sat at the back in meetings struggling so badly, right? In the rooms, right? Yes, here I am sober, and I may be 6 months, or maybe a year, or maybe a year and a half, or whatever. And my insides are in turmoil, right? And if anyone is listening to this, who is in that place, then know that, one, you're not alone. I think we all go through this in one way or another, right? You're not alone. This isn't a perfection contest of any description. We're all here to help each other. This solution, the rooms, AA, CA, has answered all my questions. Well, no, it hasn't answered all my questions, but what it has done is have provided a solution for my an ongoing solution for the obvious addiction, one, but also for the inner malady that I carry and that we all carry. And my answer, I've found, after spending a lot of time in the rooms, really being in pain, in deep pain, the solution is always more recovery and never less recovery. It's always more recovery.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Silvio. Great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting. If anybody else had a question that they'd like to ask, go ahead and send it in through WhatsApp, through our WhatsApp group. You can join that by sending an email to rico12pod@gmail.com. We'll get to those questions, answer any of the questions that may come in. But we're going to start wrapping this up. Really appreciate your time here, Silvio, and your willingness to come speak with us. Those of you out there, if you haven't already done so, please consider going and rating and reviewing RICO 12 Speaker Meeting Podcast in Apple Podcasts. It helps us get that message out there and work our step 12 by sharing this message and practicing these principles in all we do, in all our affairs. Next week, come on back. We will be hearing from another RICO 12 first-timer, John K., whose topic will be individual and couples recovery. And he'll be coming in from a fellowship that we have not yet had, and it's well, it's couples in recovery. I can't remember what the acronym is, but we'll have that here next week, and I'm excited about that. I really look forward to his experience, strength, and hope. If you would like to be considered as a future RICO 12 speaker, please send an email once again to rico12pod@gmail.com. We'll get that set up. And, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the serenity prayer that Silvio will say for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Justin, one more time for putting up the meeting. Using the word God as we understand or may come to understand. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. So be it.
Amen. Thank you, Silvio. Everybody who's here in the back rows of the rooms, in the back rows of this room, who's just sitting back and listening, there's one who has all power. That one is God, as you may understand God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. And when you do, come all the way in. Sit all the way down. Let's trudge this happy road of destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
There was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to scream, but the sound never came out. So he reached for the bottle to wash the pain away, 'cause what he wanted so badly was to live a different way. And all of his problems and all of his pain filled up the puddle and rose with the rain. His ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake, and he knew for certain that he was just a fake, just a fake. Was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to share, but only lies ever came out. So he reached for the needle to numb the pain inside, and the truth that he yearned for shriveled up and died. And all of his problems and all of his pain filled up the puddle, rose with the rain. The ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake, and he knew for certain the sight of his mouth as he read from the book. Only truth spilled out. So he reached for a power to help him through the night. 'Cause what lives